The race for statewide office. Tonight, Democratic Lieutenant Governor candidate Jody Wagner. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. We continue our one-on-one interviews with the candidates running for statewide office, campaigning for your vote this November. We're glad to have with us Democratic Lieutenant Governor candidate Jody Wagner. Nice to see you again. Thank you for being here.
It's nice to be with you today.
I love these conversations because one of the things that we like to do in the course of these half hours is really give people a chance to know the candidates beyond those 6 or 8 second sound bites to which so much of our coverage is reduced, unfortunately, these days. So we like to start out just sort of talking generally about who you are and how you came to this place of running for lieutenant governor. So you've been here, what, about 25 years in the community? 26 years.
26.
Married with 4 children, and all of them a little bit older now, huh?
Our oldest is 27, our youngest is 17.
And then by law or by career, you're a lawyer.
I am. I practiced in Norfolk for 20 years.
And how did you come into state administration?
In 2002, when Governor Warner became governor, he asked me to serve as the Virginia State Treasurer. And that's how I ended up working in Richmond. Did that for 4 years. When I took the job, I thought that I would do it for 4 and I'd come home after that. But Governor Kane tapped me to be his Secretary of Finance, so I stayed for another 3.
And so the leap from law to numbers, I know there's law and numbers and law, I get that. But, you know, I mean, there were other places I suppose you could have been tapped for. What do you think it was that caused them to tap you for that?
Well, Cathy, my law was sort of numbers. I was a securities lawyer, so I did a lot of work with numbers and with offering, circulars for banks and for
So you were in the financial
companies.
world anyway.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right, there we go. And so, boy, I tell you, timing, as they say, is everything. And you look at what a challenge this Virginia economy has been through, very much mirrored in the national economy. You had to deliver some bad news, and your successor is also just had to deliver another round of bad news. It's tough times in the Commonwealth from a financial perspective.
It is. It's been that way off and on for the past 8 years. When Mark and I took office in 2002, we faced a really troubled state budget. At the time, we knew when we came in we were facing at least $1 billion shortfall. That grew to $6 billion. We had rating agencies that were furious with us because they didn't agree with a lot of the gimmicks that the Gilmore administration had done. And we had to repair those relationships. We had to get the budget straight. And if you recall, in 2004, we passed an historic budget, which really invested in education, and did that in connection with trying to maintain and ultimately maintaining our AAA credit rating.
And so as you look at the situation now, we've just in the last month or so had yet another round of budget cuts. Is there anything left to cut in the budget?
Well, Cathy, it's painful. There are some very hard choices that are being made, and there's significant sacrifices. Cuts to public safety are very troubling. Cuts to higher education are very troubling. But when you're facing the magnitude of the shortfall that the governor's facing, he doesn't have a choice. I know that he worked very hard to protect K-12 education. But, ultimately, you've got to balance the budget. In Virginia, we're very proud that we've done that every year, and that's why we're respected by the rating agencies. Frankly, there are only 2 choices. You either raise taxes or you cut expenditures, and both Governors Warner and Governor Kane, and when I was with them, I was very involved in cutting expenses and trimming state government to fit the resources.
So as you look at the role of a lieutenant governor, what is it about that that's appealing to you?
Well, when I was serving with Governor Kane as Secretary of Finance, I really was involved in every major decision that we had. And it became clear to me that the state's facing, a significantly difficult time right now. We need to work hard to create jobs, to build 21st century attractive jobs that are going to come with benefits. We've got to worry about education. In K-12, we're facing a tremendous dropout rate. And statewide, 1 in 5 students drops out of high school. That's not the kind of 21st century workforce that we need to be building for the future. Sadly, it's better than the national average, which is 1 in 4. So we've got a lot of work to do. And then transportation is something that we've certainly tried to fix but haven't been able to because of a resistant House of Delegates. But we've got to get it done, because ultimately, if we don't fix transportation, it's going to be very hard to build jobs in Virginia.
And so what is the Lieutenant Governor's specific role in those areas?
Well, the Lieutenant Governor has a very critical role, which is to preside over the Senate and break ties in the Senate. And, you know, with the Senate that is now 21 Democrats and 19 Republicans, there are a lot of times where you can end up with a tie. And there are a lot of scenarios where we could end up with a 2020 Senate where the Lieutenant Governor could be the tie-breaking vote continually.
So let's talk about some of those issues specifically. You talked about this issue of job creation, and I think that is on so many people's minds, particularly in this tough economy where so many people are losing jobs and having, in some parts of the state, a rougher time, certainly, than we are here. How do you go about creating jobs, and what do you have in mind to do that?
Well, you know, in Virginia, we have a Governor's Opportunity Fund, and Governor Warner and Governor Kane and I worked to build that fund up and increase it. We met with some resistance. It's not as large as it needs to be. But not only do you need that fund, I believe you need a fund that is tailored just to attract the research-based, science-based industries that we really need to have in Virginia. When I was practicing law, I represented a lot of small tech companies that were trying to do things either in the biotech area or in research areas. And Virginia doesn't really have any tools to attract them and retain them. Our neighboring states do.
Talk about incentive funds, that sort of thing?
Incentive funds, tax benefits.
Right.
And if you compare Maryland and you compare Virginia, or you compare North Carolina and Virginia, those two states are far more attractive in some ways. You know, we've got better universities and a great workforce. So we have the basic tools. We just need to add some incentives to attract them.
So how do you do that within the context of the conversations we've been having over the last couple of months about a state budget that, as you say, is really cut to the core and challenging in terms of services?
Well, it's going to be an allocation of resources. And the types of dollars that we're talking about for incentives are relatively small compared to the state budget, but they can have a huge magnitude effect. So I believe it's very important that we make those investments and attract the right industries here to the state and then keep them in the state.
And so as you look at that budget, do you see areas that we could, that are still what you might call targets of opportunity?
You know, I wish I could tell you there were. When I was Secretary of Finance, we did, you know, we also faced a significant amount of budget cuts, and they were painful then. So I can only imagine how painful it is now. We did some creative things. For example, we used to publish a list of drugs that were permitted in the Medicaid program. Instead of publishing the list and sending it out in books, which cost about $100,000, we put it on the internet, costing nothing. Those kinds of you know, using technology to our benefit have been done. We had, and I participated in a group that looked at how to streamline and use different technologies and different things to make state government more efficient. We can continue to work on becoming more efficient, but I don't think there are any huge dollars to be saved. We can always have continuous improvement, and we should have continuous improvement.
Well, let's talk for a moment. I know you've been touring all around the state, and certainly every different part of the state has a different primary challenge, if you will. But in our area, certainly, I think there's great agreement that transportation is a terrific challenge in this region. And certainly, if you look at what happened on July 2nd over the summer, when you had the whole backup at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, boy, if that didn't tell you there's a problem, I'm not sure what would. As you think about transportation, and you've had 25 years of dealing with it here, where are your priorities, and what do you think we should do, and then how would you pay for that?
Well, I mean, Cathy, you're right. Transportation has become very difficult. When I started working in state government in 2002, I had to worry about getting home on Friday afternoon in the summer. Right. You know, there you might have some sort of holdup at the tunnel. Now you can run into a problem any time of the day, during the summer, during the winter. So you know, we have outgrown our infrastructure, and we're going to need to invest in our infrastructure, but we're also going to need to try and get cars off the roads. I believe very strongly that we need to look at public transportation as a solution too. You know, it is exciting that Norfolk is building the light rail project. It is, living at the beach, I am thrilled that Virginia Beach is probably going to add on and join it. That will take a lot of cars off the road. We need higher speed rail to go from Hampton Roads to Richmond, and then from Richmond to Northern Virginia, because that will be a huge benefit. And You know, frankly, when gas goes to $4 a gallon again, and unfortunately it probably will, people are going to be looking for those opportunities.
As you look at specific projects in the region, there's been a lot of conversation in the recent year or so about the addition of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, expansion of that infrastructure as part of that, or in addition to the 6 projects that are already on the table. Where do you stand on those kinds of issues?
Well, you know, I think that there's a planning organization in each locale, in each area. Hampton Roads has one, and I think that that organization, comprised of leaders from this area, is going to have to prioritize. You know, they're going to have to say, this is my first priority, second, third, fourth, and then we need to get about the business of getting them done. And
their point is, you can't really prioritize them because it's interlocking, and one is dependent on the other.
Well, but you can't do them all at once. So we're going to have to make some decisions.
So assuming we make the decisions, how do we go about paying for those?
Well, we are going to need additional resource, and I agree that that's the case. I disagree with the way my opponent is planning on paying for it. You know, we are facing hard cuts right now in public safety, health care, education. We can't take more money out of the general fund and use it for transportation. That's just not reasonable. So you can't pay for asphalt by cutting textbooks. It just doesn't make any sense.
So don't take it out of the general fund.
So don't take it out of the general fund.
That argues for some sort of alternate revenue source.
We are going to need additional revenue, and here are my rules. It has to be sustainable. You know, we can't just do one-times. You know, the idea that we're going to privatize the ABC stores and get a one-shot, you know, whether or not you think it's a good idea to privatize them, one-shots don't solve transportation needs. We need sustainable revenue. We need to make sure that it's broad-based in its application, and we need to make sure that we recognize that we're changing the way we power our cars. You know, I'm guilty of it. 10 years ago, I drove a car that got 20 miles to the gallon. Today, I drive a car that gets 47 miles to the gallon. I'm driving just as much or more, and I'm paying less. So, you know, that's going to happen continually.
So as you think about those, something that would meet those criteria, certainly a lot of people have talked about public-private partnerships. A lot of people have talked about the possibility of tolls on new and on existing roads.
Well, let's be clear. Public-private partnership is probably a toll, because the private, you know,
they're not going to do it unless there's money in it, right? Yeah.
So, and I am totally in favor of public-private partnerships that can be done in a way where the toll makes sense. You know, we can't have tolls that are so high that nobody will use the infrastructure. So we have to build it in an affordable fashion, you know, where people can do it. And that's one of the challenges that we have. Some of the public-private partnerships that have been proposed, like on 460, to widen 460, if we did it just with public-private partnership dollars, the toll would be too high. So we need to make sure that we right-size the investment by the private sector so that they can get a, you know, they can do it at a toll that you're willing to pay rather than going around it.
So a piece of it is tolls that are affordable. Are there any other revenue streams that you would look at?
Well, you know, we've proposed umpteen different options over the past 7 years, and I think we need to do whatever we can feasibly get through the General Assembly. You know, that has been the bottleneck. You know, this, fortunately for us, solving transportation isn't like curing cancer. We know that there's a solution, but in order to get that solution, we have to have the political will to make the decisions. So we're going to have to sit down with the General Assembly, whoever's in charge on January 10th or 14th, whenever they're sworn in, and make some hard decisions, but we've got to get about doing it. You know, in 2002, when we didn't invest in our infrastructure, when we made that decision, Jacksonville did. And today, Jacksonville has an incredible road system, and we're mired in gridlock.
As you think about that issue from the perspective of talking you said whatever we could get the General Assembly to agree to. Boy, that's a big if, considering the tone and tenor of some of the conversations that have gone on. You talk to folks in the Hampton Roads delegation, and they'll say, we just can't seem to convince those folks in Southwest Virginia or in other sections of Virginia, and we've tried really hard to work with Northern Virginia. So what's different? What's the game changer there?
Well, let's be clear. It is not Southwest Virginia that's the problem. You know, you have Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads that have enough delegates combined to get anything done. It is a problem with the leadership in the General Assembly. I believe strongly that there are some let's be honest about it. There are some Republicans in the House of Delegates that are opposed to doing anything to make that investment. They've resisted every single effort that's been made. And ultimately, they need to move on and go back to their private lives and let us get it done. Bill Bolling, who's running for lieutenant governor again, and is saying in his campaign literature that he's going to be he is going to champion a solution to transportation, hasn't done one thing to get anything done.
But so much of that is related to the personalities at play and so if you don't know who's going to be elected, I guess my question is, what do you bring uniquely to that scenario that helps to achieve some sort of a scenario in which there could be achieved agreement?
Well, Cathy, I think I have a long history of working in a bipartisan fashion to get things done. Let me give you an example. In 2008, Governor Kane and I submitted a package of investment in higher education. We saw the downturn as an opportunity for the state to get some buildings that needed to be built done affordably and to build the infrastructure to educate our next several decades of workforce in the areas where we had shortages: a medical school at Eastern Virginia Medical School, a school of nursing at Norfolk State, engineering schools, science schools. So we put the packages in. And the House changed it, and the Senate changed it, and it came time for them to adjourn, and they couldn't get agreement. So they appointed a conference committee. And Governor Kane said the conference committee met for the first time. They couldn't get past page 1, literally. So Governor Kane said, well, he called up the chairs of both committees and said, would you let Jody and her team work with you to bring resolution? They both said yes, one Democrat, one Republican. We got to the business of working together to solve it, and within 2 weeks we had a package and had solved all the procedural things that they were fighting about, so that it was adopted unanimously in the reconvened session. And today we have construction going on there. Eastern Virginia Medical School is breaking ground to start its medical school. There's construction in Norfolk State. There's construction on the peninsula at Christopher Newport. It is important that we be able to get past that and work in a bipartisan fashion. I think I can do that, and as Lieutenant Governor, I would roll up my sleeves and work to get it done. One
of the other issues that faces whoever assumes your office is the office for which you're running is this whole issue of health care and health coverage. We have a number of families in the Commonwealth whose children are covered under the FAMOUS program. You've said you'd like to increase the income levels of that to allow more eligibility for the FAMOUS program. How do you do that in again, same deal, how do you do that in the context of a budget that's pretty tough?
Well, I don't think you can do it until the economy rebounds. And as the economy rebounds, we will have new revenues that we can invest in areas that really need it. And that's an area that really needs it. Health care, especially for children, is just so critically important.
It occurs to me, and I always say this anytime we talk about this FAMOUS program, so many people aren't familiar or aware about this program, but the fact of the matter is, if you have a child and you meet certain income requirements, you should check out the website and see if your child qualifies. I mean, there are lots of families in the Commonwealth who just don't understand that program is available for them, even at the current income levels.
Well, when we took office in the Warner administration, that program was hardly marketed by the Gilmore administration. And Governor Warner made that a huge priority, and we got it done and registered hundreds, I think it was 100,000 children in the program.
As you think about what we face coming down the road, a lot of people look at the role of the lieutenant governor or the post of a lieutenant governor as a bit of a stepping off point, a jumping off point to an eventual run for the governor's office. Is that in your thinking?
In my thinking right now is that we need a lieutenant governor who's going to get about the business of getting things done and doing the job. The lieutenant governor has 2 jobs. One is preside over the Senate and break ties, and the second is to serve on 5 critical boards and commissions. And one of those is very important to Hampton Roads, the Virginia Military Advisory Council, which is intended to forge a relationship between the commanders of the bases and the state. Do you know that my opponent, Bill Bolling, has never shown up for a meeting? Not one.
So,
in fact, out of all those boards and commissions, he's only gone to one of them a little bit at a time. And truthfully, if you added up where he should have been and where he went, he has less than a 10% attendance record.
So as you look at that, that would be a priority for you,
Totally.
attending these. You also mentioned the possibility of privatizing the ABC board as something that people talk about. So I wonder, where are you on that issue? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, first of all, whether or not you privatize it, the money has to stay in the places that it's currently being invested. $65 million a year goes into mental health programs from the ABC profits. Another $40 million goes into education and public safety. So, we need to look at whether it's reasonable to privatize it, but even, if you decide to privatize it, we need to make sure that that money stays invested in those core needs.
The other issue that comes up, particularly here in Hampton Roads, and about which the Commonwealth will have much to say, is the future of Fort Monroe. What happens to that beautiful place when it eventually is turned over from the Army to the Commonwealth? There has been a very interesting citizen-based development to encourage the creation of what they call a great grand place, a Fort Monroe National Park. This is the time when we're, in fact, on public broadcasting this fall. There's a major project on national parks. So I wonder about that issue, about the future of Fort Monroe, whether you see a national park there as an option or what you'd like to see take shape there.
I actually served on the Fort Monroe FATA, which is what it's called, as Secretary of Finance. And I am all in favor of a national park if it can be self-funding. The problem is the state doesn't have extra resource to support any more projects, that are like that. We've really got to make some hard decisions. So if we can find a way, if the federal government's going to step to the plate and take it over as a national park, that would be great. But if not, there are a lot.
Would you encourage that?
I think they've actually are in the process of doing a study. As I understand it, the federal government doesn't have enough money allocated to take care of the parks that it has. So we would need assurance that they were actually going to invest in it and then maintain it. But there are a lot of creative reuses that have been proposed where you keep some of it in a very historic park available to the public, and you use some of it for some creative reuse that allows us to help pay for it.
One of the other, I know a piece of what you do in elective statewide office is you have at least some involvement in the oversight of state agencies and that sort of thing. One of the agencies that consistently comes under fire, as you know, is VDOT. And certainly I think this summer, where there was the admission of human error in the episode at the bridge on July 2nd, that spotlight was shined yet again on VDOT and how it is managed as an agency. I wonder if you have some observations about that, or what sort of skills and abilities need to be brought to the table to either figure out whether there's a problem there, or if there's not a problem, to somehow communicate that.
Well, I think first of all, VDOT has been struggling with budget cuts continually. I know that they've cut close to 1,000 people, and perhaps more with this recent round. So, they're adjusting to their changes in their population within that agency. We probably do need to look at their procedures, and we probably do need to look at the safeguards. We really have to apply a risk management assessment on VDOT just like we should on every critical state agency.
Do you see any business in which the state should not be participating? I mean, that's a great philosophical debate about what the role of government is and isn't. So I wonder what you think about that.
Well, it's hard. Virginia is actually a very small state government. When you look at what we do compared to a lot of our, our other states, we don't do that many things. We're very restrictive. I am more than willing to talk about, what things we might be able to get out of the business of, but we have, the basic core businesses, which is what we spend most of the state dollars on, are things that need to be done by government: public safety, K-12 education, investing in higher education, health care in the Medicaid program. Those are things that if the state doesn't do it, nobody else is going to.
But as you think about that, the other thing that the state does participate in from time to time has to do with funding of the arts, funding for elements like that. And I wonder about what your take is on that, because there's been a great debate about that.
Well, and that's a debate that we ought to have, that the citizens ought to talk about. The arts are very much a critical part of the fabric of society, but they're also a very small percentage of what we spend in state government.
Well, Jody Wagner, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Well, same here. Thank you so much for having me, Cathy.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And the website, do you have a website to which you'd like to refer people?
I do. It's www.jody4va.com.
Jody4va.com. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Appreciate it.
take care. It's always good to see you. Jody Wagner is a candidate for Lieutenant Governor in the Commonwealth, and of course that election is coming up. We will continue to have our conversations with all the candidates. In fact, next week, Republican Lieutenant Governor candidate Bill Bolling will join us. And if you want to keep up with all of our candidate conversations, just subscribe to our video or audio podcast at itunes.com. You can reach us anytime online through our website. That's whatmatters.tv. And in fact, you can watch this broadcast or any of our past broadcasts there at the website, whatmatters.tv. You can also send us an email at whatmatters@whro.org. Of course, you can always join us on Facebook, and we'll be glad to send you an e-bit each week with a look at what we're working on for that particular week's show. Over on the radio side, I hope you'll tune us in at 89.5 WHRV, public radio for Hampton Roads. The program is called Hearsay. We're on each Monday through Friday from noon to 1. Love to have you be part of the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Cathy Lewis. We'll see you next time for another look at what matters.